Poor single dad helped a woman change her tire. What she whispered next made him collapse in tears, because the moment that stranger leaned in, she revealed a secret so life-shattering. It turned one simple act of kindness into the truth he never knew was waiting for him. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain drummed steadily on the truck's roof as Jack stared at Grace, his mind struggling to make sense of her words. His hands, still grimy from changing the tire, gripped the wrench tightly. "Uncle?" The word echoed in his head like a distant thunderclap. "I'm sorry," he managed, his voice barely audible above the rain. "I think there must be some mistake." But even as he spoke, something tugged at his memory. Something about her eyes, the way she carried herself. Grace pulled her rain jacket closer, water dripping from its edges. "Danny Callahan," she said softly. "He was my brother." The wrench slipped from Jack's fingers, clattering against the wet asphalt. Danny. A flood of memories rushed through him. Sand-swept horizons, the weight of combat gear, shared laughter in the midst of chaos. And then, that final day. "Danny," Jack repeated, his throat tight. He glanced back at his truck where Ella sat watching them, her small face pressed against the window, curiosity evident in her expression. "But how?" "I've been trying to find you for months," Grace explained, her voice trembling slightly. "When Danny, before he died, he made me promise to look after his family. All of his family." Jack's mind raced. Danny had never mentioned a sister, but then again, there was so much they hadn't had time to share. The rain seemed to fall harder now, but neither of them moved to seek shelter. "I don't understand," Jack said, running a hand through his wet hair. "Why now? After all these years?" Grace's eyes welled with tears that mixed with the raindrops on her cheeks. "Because of Lila." The name hit Jack like a physical blow. "Lila?" he whispered. "Danny's daughter?" Grace said. "Your niece. She's 7 years old, the same age as your Ella." Jack stumbled back slightly, steadying himself against Grace's car. A niece, Danny's child. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the implications sank in. "Danny never knew," Grace continued, her words coming faster now. "He never knew his wife was pregnant when he deployed that last time, and after we lost him, Sarah, his wife, she couldn't cope. She left Lila with me when the baby was just 6 months old. I've been raising her ever since." In the truck, Ella honked the horn playfully, making both adults jump. The sound seemed to break through Jack's daze, and he looked at Grace with new focus. "You're telling me that my best friend had a daughter?" he said slowly. "And for 7 years, I never knew she existed?" Grace nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I wanted to tell you sooner. I've been searching, but you moved around so much after leaving the service. It wasn't until I saw your name on the hospital staff list, I work with the Veterans Support Network, that I finally found you." "The flat tire," Jack said suddenly. It wasn't really. A small, guilty smile crossed Grace's face. "I may have created an opportunity. I couldn't think of another way to approach you that wouldn't seem overwhelming." Jack let out a shaky breath, looking up at the gray sky as if seeking answers there. Does Lila know about me?" "She knows about her Uncle Jack," Grace said gently. "I've told her stories about you and Danny. She has a picture of the two of you in uniform on her bedside table." The horn honked again, and this time Ella rolled down the window, her voice carrying through the rain. "Daddy? Are you okay?" Jack turned toward his daughter, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just give me another minute." "She looks just like you," Grace observed, watching Ella. "Lila. She looks just like Danny." The simple statement brought a fresh wave of emotion crashing over Jack. He could picture Danny's face so clearly. The same easy smile he'd worn even in the worst moments, the determined set of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes. "I need time," Jack said finally, his voice rough. It's a lot to process." Grace nodded quickly. "Of course. I understand." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, protected from the rain by a small plastic sleeve. "Here's my number and my address. We live just outside of town, in the old Miller place on Sycamore Road." Jack took the card with unsteady fingers. "The white farmhouse with the wraparound porch? That's the one," Grace confirmed. "Lila loves it there. She has her own vegetable garden, just like Danny used to have when we were kids. Another piece of Danny he'd never known about, a childhood love of gardening." How many other things had he never learned about his best friend? I should get Ella home, Jack said, glancing at his truck again. She's had a long morning at church, and I've been working all night. Of course, Grace said again. She hesitated, then added, Jack, I know this is overwhelming, but Lila asks about you sometimes. When you're ready, if you're ready, she'd love to meet you. Jack nodded, unable to form words around the lump in his throat. He picked up his dropped wrench and turned toward his truck, then paused. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking care of her. For loving her when Danny couldn't? Grace's eyes filled with fresh tears. He was my brother, and Lila is. She's the best of him. Just like your Ella is the best of you. Jack walked back to his truck, his boots splashing through puddles, his mind whirling with questions and memories. As he climbed into the driver's seat, Ella immediately bombarded him with questions. Who was that lady? Daddy? Why were you talking so long? Why do you look sad? Jack started the VIL engine, watching in his rearview mirror as Grace got into her car. That lady's name is Grace, he said carefully. And she knew your Uncle Danny, the one who died in the war? Ella asked, her voice dropping to a whisper like it always did when she mentioned Danny. That's right, sweetheart. Jack pulled onto the road, his windshield wipers pushing away the rain that seemed to be finally letting up. And it turns out Uncle Danny has a little girl, just like me. Ella's eyes widened with excitement. Really? A girl my age? Can we meet her? Can we, Daddy? Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind full of Danny's face, of Grace's tears, of a little girl he'd never known existed who apparently had his picture by her bed. Maybe soon, Princess, he said softly. Maybe soon. The rain drummed steadily on the truck's roof as Jack stared at Grace, his mind struggling to make sense of her words. His hands, still grimy from changing the tire, gripped the wrench tightly. Uncle? The word echoed in his head like a distant thunderclap. I know this must be a shock, Grace said softly, her eyes full of understanding. Maybe we could talk somewhere dry? There's a diner just up the road. Jack glanced back at his truck where Ella sat watching them curiously through the window, her breath fogging up the glass. His heart was pounding, but years of military training had taught him to keep his composure even when thrown off balance. Sure, he managed, his voice rougher than usual. Follow us in your car. It's just around the bend. 5 minutes later, they pulled into the gravel parking lot of May's Country Kitchen, a worn but welcoming local diner that had been serving comfort food to travelers and townspeople for decades. The neon open sign buzzed in the window, a beacon through the gray morning rain. Inside, the warm aroma of coffee and bacon wrapped around them like a familiar blanket. A few early morning regulars hunched over their newspapers and plates, paying them no mind. The vinyl booths squeaked as they slid in, Ella happily settling next to her father with her beloved coloring book and crayons. Would you like some pancakes, sweetie? Jack asked Ella, trying to keep his voice steady despite the tremors in his chest. Ella nodded eagerly, already focused on carefully coloring within the lines of her book. A tired-looking waitress brought them menus and took their drink orders, coffee for the adults and chocolate milk for Ella. Once Ella was contentedly occupied with her coloring and the waitress had dropped off their drinks, Grace reached into her weathered leather bag. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with care. This belonged to Danny, she said quietly, her voice catching on her brother's name. My parents kept all his things after Afghanistan. When they passed last year, I found this in their attic. Among his personal effects, it's addressed to you, Jack. Jack's fingers felt numb as he took the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, Danny's distinctive scrawl that he'd seen countless times on mission reports and letters home. His throat tightened at the sight of it. Danny was my brother, Grace continued softly, watching Jack's face. He talked about you all the time in his letters home, his best friend, the man who had his back through everything. Jack stared at the envelope, his coffee growing cold and forgotten. Memories flooded back. Danny's infectious laugh, his unwavering loyalty, the way he could lift everyone's spirits even in the darkest moments of their deployment, in that final day. I've been trying to find you for months, Grace explained. When I got the grant to open the Veteran Rehabilitation Clinic here in Tennessee, I thought maybe it was more than coincidence. Then this morning, there you were, stopping to help with my flat tire, just like Danny would have done. Jack's hands shook as he carefully opened the envelope, preserving its seal as best he could. The paper inside was crisp, as if Danny had written it yesterday instead of years ago. He unfolded it slowly, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. Dear Jack, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it back. I'm writing this letter before our next deployment, just in case. There are things you need to know, brother. Things I should have told you face to face, but never found the right moment. First, thank you for being the best friend a man could ask for. For all the times you had my back, all the laughs we shared, all the dark moments you helped me through. You're the most honorable man I've ever known, Jack. But I need to confess something. Remember Sarah, the girl I told you about from back home? There's more to that story. We had a daughter together, Jack. Her name is Lila. Sarah couldn't handle being a military mom, so my parents and Grace have been raising her. She's the light of my life, even though I've only seen her between deployments. I know this is a lot to take in, but here's why I'm telling you. If something happens to me, I want you to know about her. To be there for her if you can. You're the best father I know. I've seen how you are with little Ella. And maybe, somehow, our kids could be family to each other, the way you and I were brothers in all but blood. I'm leaving instructions with Grace about all this. She'll know when the time is right. Just know that whatever happened to me, I went out doing what I believed in, alongside the best man I've ever known. Take care of yourself, brother. And if you can find it in your heart, be the uncle to Lila that I'll never get to be to Ella. Your brother always, Danny. Jack's vision blurred as he finished reading. He blinked hard, aware of Ella humming happily beside him as she colored, oblivious to how her world was about to change. His hands gripped the letter tightly, his knuckles white with emotion. Lila is 11 now, Grace said gently, pulling a photo from her wallet and sliding it across the table. She has his smile. Jack stared at the photo of a girl with Danny's warm brown eyes and infectious grin. The same grin that had kept their unit's spirits up through countless hard days and nights. The same grin he saw in his dreams, covered in dust and blood, telling him to run, to live, to make it home to Ella. I'm so sorry I waited this long, Grace continued, her voice thick with emotion. Our parents were protective of Lila, and after they passed, I needed time to figure out the right way to do this. To honor Danny's wishes without disrupting everyone's lives. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of Jack's mobile home as he sat at his small kitchen table, Danny's letter trembling in his hands. The paper felt thin, delicate, like it might crumble under the weight of the words it carried. Outside, crickets began their nightly chorus, a familiar sound that usually brought comfort but now seemed distant and hollow. Ella's footsteps patted across the worn linoleum floor. "Daddy, was Uncle Danny your best friend?" Jack looked up from the letter, meeting his daughter's curious eyes. She stood there in her favorite pajamas, the ones with cartoon puppies, clutching her stuffed elephant. His throat tightened. "Come here, sweetheart." He patted his knee, and she climbed up, settling against his chest. The familiar weight of her small body helped anchor him to the present. "Yeah, Uncle Danny was my very best friend in the whole world." "Like how Sophie is my best friend at school?" Jack managed a small smile. "Kind of like that, but we were soldiers together. We looked out for each other." "Tell me about him?" Ella's eyes sparkled with interest. Jack took a deep breath, carefully folding the letter and setting it aside. "Well, Uncle Danny was the kind of person who could make anyone laugh, even on the hardest days. One time, when we were in the desert and it was so hot we could barely think straight, he started telling jokes to keep our spirits up." "What kind of jokes?" "Oh, silly ones. He had this one about why the cookie went to the doctor." Jack's voice grew warmer with the memory. "Because it was feeling crumbly." Ella giggled, and the sound lightened something in Jack's chest. "He sounds funny." He was. But he was also the bravest person I ever knew. He always put others first. Jack's hand absently rubbed circles on Ella's back. "This one time, our truck broke down miles from base. Danny stayed up all night fixing it, just so the rest of us could sleep." "Like how you fix Mrs. Peterson's car sometimes?" "Exactly like that, honey." Jack swallowed hard. "Uncle Danny taught me a lot about helping others." They talked until Ella's eyes grew heavy and Jack carried her to bed, tucking her in with extra care. "Sweet dreams, princess," he whispered, kissing her forehead. But sweet dreams weren't in store for Jack that night. He tossed and turned on his lumpy mattress, Danny's letter burning in his thoughts like a hot coal. When sleep finally came, it dragged him back to that day in Afghanistan, the day he lost his best friend. In his dream, the desert heat was suffocating. Dust clogged his throat, The patrol route stretched endlessly ahead, sun-bleached and treacherous. Danny walked point, just like he always did, cracking jokes over the radio to keep everyone alert. Then came the explosion. Jack jolted awake, his shirt soaked with sweat, heart hammering against his ribs. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. The familiar shapes of his bedroom slowly emerged from the darkness, the dresser with its missing handle, the stack of work uniforms waiting to be washed, the small cross Ella had made him in Sunday school. He sat up, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to push away the images that still flickered behind them. The sound of Danny's last words echoed in his ears. "Take care of them, brother. Promise me." Sleep didn't return that night. Jack watched the sunrise through his window, its pink and orange rays gradually filling the small bedroom. When his phone rang at 7:30 a.m., he was already dressed and making Ella's breakfast. "Jack, it's Grace." Her voice was warm but tentative. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, I'm up." He poured milk over Ella's cereal, watching her arrange her apple slices into a smiley face on her plate. "I wanted to invite you and Ella to see the veteran center we're building. It's not finished yet, but..." She paused. "Danny would have loved it. And there's something else I'd like to discuss with you, in person." Jack's hand tightened on the phone. The thought of stepping into another piece of Danny's legacy made his chest constrict. But Ella looked up at him with those big, hopeful eyes, and he found himself saying, "What time?" After arranging to meet Grace later that morning, Jack walked to his bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of his dresser. Beneath a stack of old t-shirts lay a shoebox he hadn't opened in years. His hands shook slightly as he lifted the lid. The photograph sat on top, protected in a clear plastic sleeve. Two young men in desert camo, arms thrown around each other's shoulders, grinning despite the dust and heat. Danny's smile was as bright as ever, his dog tags glinting in the Afghan sun. Jack barely recognized his younger self. The man in the photo hadn't yet learned how heavy grief could be. He traced the edge of the photo with his finger, remembering the day it was taken. They'd just survived their first firefight together. Danny had pulled out his battered camera, insisting they document the moment. "So we can show our kids someday," he'd said. Jack's vision blurred. He hadn't known then that Danny would never get the chance to show his own child this photo. But now, with Grace's appearance and the letter's revelations, the weight of Danny's final request pressed down on him like a physical thing. "Daddy?" Ella's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Can I have more apple slices?" Jack carefully returned the photo to its box. "Coming, sweetheart," he called back, his voice rough. As he stood, his reflection caught his eye in the small mirror above his dresser. The man looking back at him wasn't the young soldier from the photo, but he still carried Danny's memory, and now, it seemed, Danny's last wishes. He squared his shoulders and headed back to the kitchen, where Ella waited with her empty plate and endless questions about the uncle she'd never known. Each step felt heavy with purpose, weighted by promises made and kept, and others yet to be fulfilled. The Veteran Center was taking shape on the outskirts of town, its wooden bones rising against the morning sky. Jack parked his old pickup truck next to a cluster of construction vehicles, the gravel crunching under the tires. Ella bounced in her seat, eager to explore. "Look at all the big machines." "Dad!" She pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Jack's hand stayed on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The familiar weight of anxiety pressed against his chest, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart? Stay close to me, okay?" Grace emerged from a temporary office trailer, clipboard in hand, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She waved and walked over to meet them as they climbed out of the truck. "I'm so glad you both came," she said, her smile genuine and warm. "This is quite something," Jack said, taking in the scope of the construction. The building's framework stretched across the lot, its skeleton promising something substantial. Grace nodded. "Come meet the team first." She led them toward a small group of people gathered near the trailer. "Everyone, this is Jack Warner and his daughter Ella." A tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped forward first. Tom Mitchell, Project Manager. He shook Jack's hand firmly. "Grace tells me you served with her brother." Jack nodded, the mention of Danny making his throat tight. "Yes, sir. 3rd Rangers." 2 more introductions followed, the lead architect and the site foreman. Ella stayed partially hidden behind Jack's leg, but offered small waves when people smiled at her. "Want to see what we're building?" Grace asked, directing her question to both of them but focusing on Ella, who nodded enthusiastically. They walked through what would become the main entrance. Grace pointed out different areas as they moved. Physical therapy will be here, counseling offices along this corridor, common areas for veterans to gather. Jack could see it coming together in his mind, not just the physical space, but what it meant. A haven, a place to heal, something he wished he'd had when he first came home. This room, Grace said, stopping in a large space with tall windows, will be our group therapy center. We're installing special soundproofing. She glanced at Jack knowingly. Sometimes the memories get loud. Jack swallowed hard, remembering his own battles with flashbacks and nightmares. Ella's small hand slipped into his, anchoring him to the present. And here, Grace led them to a wall near what would be the main lobby, is where we'll have our memorial. She touched the bare surface gently. Danny's name will be here, along with others we've lost, not just as names on a wall, but as reminders of why we're doing this. Ella looked up at Jack. Like the picture of Uncle Danny in your room? Jack squeezed her hand. Yeah, baby, just like that. Grace gave them a moment, then suggested, why don't we sit for a bit? There are some chairs in the trailer. Inside the climate-controlled space, Ella discovered a box of donated toys in the corner and happily settled into play. Jack sank into a folding chair, his eyes on his daughter. She saved me, you know, he said quietly, the words coming, easier than he expected. After I came home, after Danny, he cleared his throat. I was in a bad place, drinking too much, couldn't sleep, jumped at every sound. Grace sat across from him, her expression soft with understanding. Then her mother left, and suddenly I had this tiny person depending on me completely. Jack watched Ella arrange plastic animals in careful rows. I had to get better, had to be better. For her, Danny would be proud of you, Grace said. The way you've raised her. Jack shook his head. I'm just trying my best. Some days are still hard. That's why we're building this place, Grace replied, because nobody should have to do it alone. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Jack, there's something else I need to tell you, something about Danny. The serious tone in her voice made Jack sit straighter. Danny had a daughter. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He stared at Grace, trying to process what she'd said. What? She's 11 now. Her name is Lila. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. Danny didn't know about her when he deployed. Her mother. It's complicated. But she's coming to Tennessee next week. Jack's mind raced, trying to fit this new piece into the puzzle of his friend's life. Danny had a daughter, a child who'd never known her father. His chest ached with the weight of it. Does she... Jack struggled to form the question. Does she know about him? She knows some things. We've been telling her gradually, as she's gotten older. Grace leaned forward. She knows he was a hero, that he saved his best friend's life. Jack closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The explosion, the chaos. Danny pushing him down, taking the blast that should have killed them both. When he opened them again, he found himself looking at Ella, still playing contentedly with the toys. Next week? He managed to ask. Grace nodded. I wanted you to know first, to have time to process it. Jack ran a hand over his face, feeling the rough stubble under his palm. Danny had a daughter. His best friend's child had been out there all this time, growing up without knowing the incredible man her father had been. The construction sounds filtered through the trailer walls. Hammers, saws, the beeping of vehicles backing up, the sounds of something being built. Something new taking shape from empty space. Thank you, Jack finally said, for telling me. 4. He gestured vaguely at the building beyond the trailer walls. All of this? Grace's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Danny always said you were the best man he knew. I'm starting to understand why. Ella chose that moment to bring over a plastic giraffe, presenting it to Grace with a shy smile. This one's my favorite, she announced. Grace accepted the toy with appropriate solemnity. Mine too, she said, and Jack watched as his daughter beamed, unaware of the weight of the conversation that had just taken place, unaware that somewhere out there was another little girl who shared a connection to the uncle she'd never met. Back home, Jack stood in his small kitchen, mechanically chopping vegetables while his mind raced. The steady thunk of the knife against the cutting board matched his heartbeat. Danny had a daughter. The thought kept circling in his head like a carousel he couldn't stop. Can I help, Dad? Ella asked, dragging her step stool across the linoleum floor. Jack managed a smile. Sure, sweetheart. Want to tear up the lettuce for the salad? She climbed up beside him, her little hands carefully pulling apart the green leaves. Is Uncle Danny's daughter going to visit us? The knife paused mid-chop. Jack set it down and wiped his hands on a dish towel. I'm not sure yet, Elle. I think it would be nice. Ella concentrated on her task, her tongue poking out slightly. I've always wanted a big sister. Jack's chest tightened. He turned to the stove, stirring the pot of spaghetti sauce to hide his expression. It's complicated, honey. Why? The simple question hung in the air. Well, Jack searched for words a 7-year-old could understand. Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. Ella nodded sagely, as if she understood all the complexities of adult life. I'll pray about it. Pastor Mike says God helps us figure stuff out. Jack's throat felt thick. That's good, sweetheart. They ate their dinner at their small kitchen table, Ella chattering about her Sunday school lesson while Jack tried to focus on her words instead of the storm in his head. The next afternoon, Jack met Grace at Miller Park. The autumn air was crisp, leaves scattered across the grass in shades of gold and red. Ella ran straight for the playground, her pink jacket a bright spot among the metal equipment. Grace sat beside Jack on a weathered wooden bench. For a while, they just watched Ella play, her laughter carrying across the park. She's beautiful, Grace said softly. She has your smile. Jack nodded, his hands clasped between his knees. Tell me about Lila. Grace's expression softened. She's 15 now, smart as a whip, just like Danny was. She's got his eyes, that same shade of green. She paused, watching a group of birds take flight. She's had it rough, though. My parents helped me raise her until they passed 3 years ago. Why now? Jack's voice was quiet but intent. Why tell me about her now? Grace pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Danny left specific instructions in his will. He wanted you to raise Lila if anything happened to him, but... She took a deep breath. I was angry back then, grieving. I couldn't bear to let her go, and you were struggling with your own battles. Jack watched Ella swing higher and higher, her face full of joy. I was a mess after Danny died, he admitted. The PTSD, the drinking. I barely kept it together until Ella came along. I know. That's why I waited. Grace turned to face him. But Lila needs more than I can. Give her now. She needs family, real family, and Danny. Her voice caught. Danny trusted you more than anyone in the world. Jack ran a hand over his face. I can barely make ends meet as it is. I work nights, cleaning floors at the hospital, Grace. What kind of life could I give her? The kind Danny wanted for her, one with love, stability, and a father who understands loss. Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a worn shoebox. These are Danny's letters. He wrote them before his last deployment, one for each year of Lila's life. I think you should read them. Jack stared at the box as if it might burn him. I need time to think about this. Of course. Grace stood up, brushing off her jeans. Take all the time you need. But Jack? She waited until he met her eyes. Danny believed in you. Maybe it's time you believed in yourself too. That night, after tucking Ella into bed, Jack sat at his kitchen table with the shoebox. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were 15 envelopes, each marked with a year. He picked up the first one, dated 15 years ago. Dad? Ella's small voice made him jump. She stood in the doorway in her butterfly pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Can't sleep? She shook her head, patting over to climb into his lap. Will you read me one? Jack hesitated, then carefully opened the envelope. Danny's familiar handwriting filled the page. Dear Jack, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I know what you're thinking, that you should have been there, that you could have changed things. Stop that right now, brother. Some things are just meant to be. I'm writing this letter while watching my baby girl sleep. She's so tiny, Jack, with these perfect little fingers and the sweetest smile you've ever seen. I named her Lila, after my grandmother. Looking at her, I understand now what my dad always said about how having kids changes everything. I need you to know something. If anything happens to me, I want you to raise her. I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only person I trust completely. You're the most honorable man I've ever known, and I want my daughter to grow up knowing the kind of person her father called his best friend. Take care of her, Jack. Love her like she's your own. And please, tell her about me. Not just the soldier, but the man who loved country music and terrible jokes, who cried at sad movies and always burned the toast. I have to go now. Dawn patrol in an hour. But remember, you're my brother, not by blood, but by choice. And that makes you Lila's family, too. Always, Danny. Jack's voice cracked on the last words. Ella reached up and wiped a tear from his cheek. "Don't be sad, Daddy," she whispered. "Uncle Danny's watching over us from heaven, and now we can watch over Lila too." Jack hugged his daughter close, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. In that moment, he felt Danny's presence as clearly as if his friend were standing right there in the kitchen, grinning that crooked smile of his. Maybe Ella was right. Maybe this was exactly what they all needed. The wooden steps of the old church creaked under Jack's boots as he climbed them slowly. The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows, painting the foyer in soft blues and greens. Pastor Louise Mayfield was already waiting at her office door, as if she'd known he was coming. "Jack Warner?" she said warmly, her silver hair catching the light. "I had a feeling I'd be seeing you soon." The familiar smell of coffee and old books filled her office as Jack settled into the worn leather chair across from her desk. He'd sat here countless times before. Usually when his world felt like it was spinning out of control, "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world again," Pastor Mayfield observed, pouring him a cup of coffee from her ever-present pot. "What's on your heart?" Jack wrapped his calloused hands around the warm mug. "Danny had a daughter," he said quietly, "and his sister Grace wants me to raise her." Pastor Mayfield's eyebrows rose slightly, but she remained silent, giving him space to continue. "She's 15 now. Been living with Grace since Danny died." His voice caught. "I don't know if I can do this, Pastor. I barely make ends meet with Ella. And a teenager? I'm not qualified." The pastor leaned back in her chair, studying him with knowing eyes. "Qualified?" she repeated. "Jack, when has God ever called the qualified? He qualifies the called." "But why me? Why now?" "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "the better question is, why not now? Look at your life, Jack. When you came home from war, you were broken, but God gave you Ella, and through her, He gave you purpose." She paused, letting her words sink in. Maybe this isn't about being qualified. Maybe it's about being willing. Jack stared into his coffee. "I'm scared," he admitted. "What if I fail her? What if I fail?" "Danny, fear and faith can't occupy the same space, Jack." Pastor Mayfield's voice was gentle but firm. "Remember when Ella was born? You were terrified then too. But love made room, didn't it?" "This is different," Jack protested. "Ella was a baby. This girl, Lila, she's already grown up without me. She's got her own history, her own hurts. Just like someone else I know," Pastor Mayfield said pointedly. She reached across her desk and touched his hand. "Jack, sometimes God's greatest gifts come wrapped in challenges. You understand pain, you understand loss. Who better to help heal a wounded heart?" The morning light shifted, and Jack watched dust motes dance in the sunbeam between them. "I keep thinking about Danny," he said softly. "About what he'd want. And what do you think that would be? He'd want her taken care of, loved." Jack's throat tightened. "He saved my life, Pastor." Maybe this is how I save his daughters." Pastor Mayfield smiled. "Now you're listening to your heart instead of your fears." They talked for another hour, about practical matters and spiritual ones, about fatherhood and faith and second chances. When Jack finally stood to leave, he felt lighter somehow, as if the burden had transformed into something more like purpose. That afternoon, Grace's car pulled into his gravel driveway. Ella was at her friend's house, but Jack could imagine her excitement if she were here. Grace carried a thick manila folder as she approached the front porch. "I brought everything," she said, settling onto the old porch swing beside him. "School records, medical history, photos." She handed him the folder. "And Danny's will." Jack opened it carefully. A photo slipped out. A teenage girl with Danny's eyes and determined chin. Her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wasn't quite smiling at the camera, but there was something familiar in her expression that made his chest ache. "She's doing well in school," Grace said softly. "But she's guarded. Struggles to trust people. She needs stability, Jack. A real home." Jack nodded, thumbing through the documents. "When does she arrive?" "Next Tuesday." Grace watched him carefully. "Are you saying yes?" "I'm saying I'll meet her," Jack replied. "We'll take it from there." Grace's relief was visible. "Danny would be proud of you, you know." After she left, Jack stood in his yard as evening fell, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The folder felt heavy in his hands, full of 15 years of a life he should have known about, a life Danny had wanted him to be part of. The cricket song swelled around him as night settled in. Jack looked up at the vast expanse of stars, feeling small and uncertain. "Danny," he whispered into the darkness, his voice barely audible even to himself. "I don't know if I can do this." The stars twinkled silently overhead, offering no answers, but somewhere in his heart, Jack felt a familiar warmth, the same feeling he'd had when Danny had first trusted him to have his back in combat. Maybe that's what this was, another chance to honor that trust, to protect what Danny had loved most in the world. Behind him, the porch light cast his shadow long across the grass, and in the distance, a whip pore wheel called out into the night. Jack stood there a while longer, the manila folder pressed against his chest like a shield, or maybe a promise. The bus station smelled of diesel and hot asphalt under the afternoon sun. Jack shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his hands stuffed deep in his jean pockets. Beside him, Ella bounced on her toes, clutching a hand-drawn welcome sign decorated with hearts and flowers. "When's she coming, Daddy?" Ella asked for the third time, her pigtails swinging as she craned her neck to see down the road. "Soon, sweetheart." Jack glanced at Grace, who stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the highway bend where the bus would appear. The wait felt endless. Jack's problems, Beth's stomach churned with each passing minute. He'd practiced what to say 100 times, but now all the words seemed to have vanished from his mind. A gleaming Greyhound bus finally rounded the corner, its brakes hissing as it pulled into the small station. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. Ella gripped his hand tight. Passengers began filing out, stretching and gathering their bags. Then, near the back of the line, a teenage girl emerged. She wore black jeans, combat boots, and a faded army green jacket that hung loose on her thin frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and a worn backpack was slung over one shoulder. "Lila!" Grace called out, waving. The girl's eyes found them, and Jack felt the air leave his lungs. She had Danny's eyes, the same deep brown that could see right through you. Grace rushed forward to embrace her, but Lila's hug was stiff, her face carefully blank. When Grace stepped back, gesturing toward Jack and Ella, Lila's jaw tightened. "Lila," Grace said softly, "this is your Uncle Jack and your cousin Ella." "Hi." Ella thrust her sign forward. "I made this for you. See? It says welcome home, Lila." Something flickered across Lila's face. Surprise, maybe uncertainty, before the wall came back up. She gave a small nod. "Thanks." Jack cleared his throat. It's really good to meet you, Lila. I've been looking forward to—" "Sure." Lila cut him off, turning to Grace. "Can we go? I'm tired from the ride." Grace shot Jack an apologetic look. "Of course. The car's right over here. Jack and Ella are joining us for dinner." They walked to Grace's SUV in awkward silence, broken only by Ella's cheerful chatter about her favorite local pizza place. Lila stayed close to Grace, keeping Jack in her peripheral vision like he was someone to guard against. The drive to Grace's house was tense. Jack sat in the front passenger seat while Ella tried to engage Lila in the back, showing her a small stuffed elephant she'd brought as a gift. Lila answered in monosyllables, staring out the window at the passing Tennessee countryside. Grace's house was a cozy craftsman-style home on the edge of town. Inside, the smell of lasagna filled the air. "I thought we'd have a nice home-cooked meal," Grace explained, leading them to the dining room. Dinner started quietly. The clink of forks against plates seemed too loud in the stillness. Ella, bless her heart, kept trying to draw Lila out with questions about her favorite movies and books. "Do you like Harry Potter?" Ella asked. "Daddy reads it to me every night." "I used to," Lila replied flatly. She pushed her lasagna around her plate, then suddenly looked up at Jack. "So, when did you find out about me?" The question landed like a punch to the gut. Jack set down his fork. 3 days ago, when Grace told me. 3 days ago," Lila repeated, her voice sharp. "And before that? Did you ever wonder about my dad? About whether he had a kid somewhere?" "Lila," Grace warned gently. "No, I want to know." Lila's eyes burned into Jack's. "You were his best friend, right? So where were you all this time? Did you even try to find out what happened to his family after he died?" Jack's throat felt tight. I didn't know. About you? About any of it. After Danny, after we lost him, I came home and everything was just—" He trailed off, the memories threatening to overwhelm him. "Just what?" Lila demanded. "Too hard? Too complicated? Well, try being the kid who never got to meet her dad because he died in a war and his supposed best friend couldn't be bothered to check on his family. Sweetheart, it wasn't like that. Grace tried to intervene. Then what was it like? Lila stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty simple. He didn't care enough to look. She turned and stormed out of the room. Seconds later, they heard a door slam upstairs. Silence fell heavy over the dining room. Ella's lower lip trembled. Daddy, is Lila mad at us? Jack reached over to squeeze her hand. No, baby, she's hurting. Grace dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I'm so sorry, Jack. She's been through so much. Moving around in foster care before I could get custody, never having stability. Don't apologize, Jack said quietly. She's right. I should have done more. They tried to salvage what they could of the evening, but the weight of Lila's words hung in the air. When it was time to leave, Grace hugged them both. Give her time, she whispered to Jack. She's more like Danny than she knows, including his big heart. Walking home under the pale moon, Jack held Ella's small hand in his. The streets were quiet except for the chorus of crickets and the soft pat of their footsteps. Daddy? Ella's voice was small in the darkness. Yes, sweetheart? Can we pray for Lila? She seems really sad. Jack's heart clenched. That's a good idea, baby. We can do that. And maybe tomorrow we can bring her cookies? You always say cookies make everything better. Jack managed a weak smile, though his chest ached with doubt and regret. We'll see, okay? They walked on through the night, while somewhere behind them, in Grace's guest room, a teenage girl who looked so much like his best friend lay awake, hurting with questions that had no easy answers. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the lake's surface as Jack and Ella made their way down the worn dirt path. He'd called Mike at the hospital, faking a scratchy voice to get the day off. Usually, he'd feel guilty about lying, but today he needed this. Needed to breathe, needed to think. Ella skipped ahead, her pink sneakers kicking up small clouds of dust. She stopped at the water's edge, already scanning the ground for the perfect skipping stones. Look, Daddy, this one's flat like a pancake. She held up a smooth gray stone, her face beaming with pride. Jack managed a small smile, taking the stone and turning it over in his palm. That's a good one, sweetie. Want to see how it's done? He demonstrated the proper technique, flicking his wrist just so. The stone bounced across the water's surface 1, 2, 3, 4 times, before sinking with a quiet plop. Ella clapped, then tried to mimic his motion. Her stone made one skip before disappearing beneath the surface. Almost got it, Jack encouraged, settling down on a large boulder. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. Ella continued hunting for stones, humming a Sunday school song under her breath. Hey, princess? Jack's voice came out softer than he intended. Can we talk for a minute? Ella looked up, her small hands full of rocks. She dropped them in a pile and climbed up next to him on the boulder. Is this about Lila? Jack nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I'm scared, baby girl. Why? Ella's innocent question hung in the air. Because. Jack struggled to find words simple enough for a 7-year-old to understand. Because being a daddy is a big job, and I worry sometimes that I'm not good enough at it. Ella leaned into his side. But you're the best daddy ever. You think so? His throat felt tight. Uh-huh. Ella picked up a stone and turned it over in her hands. Pastor Mayfield says God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Remember? Jack blinked hard, surprised by the wisdom coming from his little girl. When did you get so smart? Jesus makes me smart, she said matter-of-factly, then threw her stone. It skipped twice. Yes. Did you see that, Daddy? They spent another hour by the lake, skipping stones and watching a family of ducks paddle by. Jack felt some of the tension leaving his shoulders, replaced by a cautious hope. Later that afternoon, Jack met Grace at the Veteran Center construction site. They sat on stacked lumber while workers moved around them, the sound of hammering and power tools filling the air. I need to know everything, Jack said quietly. About Lila, about what she's been through. Grace's face grew serious. She folded her hands in her lap. It hasn't been easy for her. After Danny died, my parents took her in while I was overseas with Doctors Without Borders. But then they passed away within months of each other when Lila was 8. What happened then? I came back as soon as I could, but there was a gap. She spent 6 months in foster care. Grace's voice tightened. 3 different homes in that time. The system. It's not kind to scared, angry children. Jack closed his eyes, imagining an 8-year-old girl bounce from stranger to stranger. When I finally got custody, she was different. Harder. More closed off. Grace picked up a nail from the ground, rolling it between her fingers. She's smart, brilliant actually, but she struggles to trust, to let people in. She's convinced everyone leaves eventually, like her. Dad did, Jack murmured. Grace nodded. She knows Danny didn't choose to leave, but the wound is still there. And now, she met Jack's eyes. She's terrified you'll reject her. I would never, Jack started. I know that, but she doesn't. Not yet. Grace placed a gentle hand on his arm. She needs time, Jack, and patience, and love, even when she's pushing you away. Jack swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. Danny thought you were. Grace's voice was firm. He knew exactly what he was doing when he named you in his will. They talked for another hour, Grace sharing more details about Lila's life, her love of books, her talent for art, her struggle with anxiety. By the time Jack headed home, his head was spinning with information. The sun was setting when someone knocked on his trailer door. Jack opened it to find Lila standing there, hands stuffed in the pockets of her oversized hoodie. Her dark hair fell across her face like a shield. She cleared her throat. Can I maybe stay here tonight to get to know Ella better? Jack stood frozen for a moment, caught off guard. Then he heard Ella's excited squeal from behind him. Yes, please, Daddy. Please, can she stay? He stepped back, opening the door wider. Of course you can stay, Lila. Come on in. She slipped past him, her shoulders hunched. The trailer suddenly felt very small, very inadequate. But then Ella grabbed Lila's hand, already chattering about showing her their collection of seashells from their trip to Florida last summer. I know it's not much, Jack said quietly, gesturing to the modest living space. But it's home. Lila glanced around, her expression unreadable. Then her eyes landed on a framed photo of Danny in his uniform, sitting on the bookshelf. You kept his picture, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Every day since. Jack trailed off, watching as she moved closer to the photo. He was my best friend. For a moment, something flickered across Lila's face. Vulnerability, maybe, but then it was gone, replaced by her usual guarded expression. Can I see your shells now? She asked Ella, who beamed and pulled her toward the bedroom. Jack watched them go, his heart pounding with equal parts terror and hope. He remembered Grace's words about patience and love, about Danny believing in him. Okay, brother, he whispered to Danny's photo. Help me do this right. Jack stared at the half-empty box of spaghetti in his hand, mentally calculating if it would be enough for 3 people. The kitchen in his mobile home felt smaller than usual, with both girls sitting at the tiny table. Ella swung her legs back and forth, chattering about her day at school, while Lila sat with her arms crossed, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. I hope everyone likes spaghetti, Jack said, dropping the pasta into the boiling water. It's, one of my specialties. He winced at how awkward he sounded. It's Daddy's best dish, Ella announced proudly. He makes the sauce from scratch. Lila's eyes flickered briefly to the jar of store-bought marinara on the counter, but she didn't comment. Jack felt his face grow warm. Well, maybe not tonight, he admitted, running a hand through his graying hair. Been a long day. The kitchen filled with the sounds of bubbling water and the quiet scrape of the wooden spoon against the pot as Jack stirred. He could feel Lila watching his every move, assessing him. It reminded him of checking for snipers in Afghanistan, that constant awareness of being observed. He pushed the memory away and focused on not overcooking the pasta. When dinner was ready, Jack set 3 mismatched plates on the table. The overhead light flickered slightly, casting uneven shadows across their faces. Ella immediately dug in, sauce smearing around her mouth. Jack handed her a paper napkin with practiced patience. Would you like some Parmesan? He asked Lila, holding out the green container of grocery store cheese. She shrugged, but held out her plate. It was something, at least. After dinner, Jack suggested watching a movie. Their ancient TV only played DVDs, and his collection was limited. Ella bounced over to the shelf, pulling out her favorite. Can we watch The Princess Bride, please? Jack glanced at Lila, expecting an eye roll at such a childish choice. Instead, he caught a flicker of recognition in her eyes. I used to watch that with my dad, Lila said quietly. I mean, with Grace. When I was little. The room grew still. It was the first personal thing she'd shared all evening. Then it's settled, Jack said gently, taking the DVD from Ella. They settled onto the worn couch, Ella naturally curling up next to Jack, while Lila perched on the far end. As the familiar story unfolded, Jack noticed Lila's rigid posture gradually relaxing. When Ella quoted along with the "as you wish" lines, he caught the ghost of a smile on Lila's face. Halfway through the movie, Ella fell asleep against Jack's side, her breath deep and even. He carefully adjusted her position, tucking a throw pillow under her head. The tenderness of the gesture didn't escape Lila's notice. He could feel her watching again, but differently this time. When the movie ended, Jack carried Ella to her room, tucking her in with practiced ease. He returned to find the living room empty. A flash of panic hit him until he spotted Lila through the window, sitting on the wooden steps of the small porch. Jack hesitated at the door. He wasn't good at this part, the emotional stuff. Danny had always been better with words, but Danny wasn't here, and his daughter needed someone. Taking a deep breath, Jack stepped outside. The night air was cool, crickets chirping in the darkness. Lila didn't look up as Jack carefully sat down on the opposite end of the steps, giving her space. In the dim porch light, he could see tears tracking down her cheeks. They sat in silence for several long moments before Lila spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I dream about him sometimes. My dad. She wiped roughly at her face with her sleeve. It's always the same dream. He's sitting at a table, writing letters. He looks up and smiles at me, but when I try to talk to him, I can't make any sound come out. Then he just fades away. Jack's throat tightened. He stared out into the darkness, seeing not the scraggly yard but a dusty road in Afghanistan. I dream about him too, he admitted quietly. Different dreams, but he's always there. Writing those damn letters. Lila turned slightly toward him. What? What was he like? Really like? Jack clasped his hands together, choosing his words carefully. He was the best man I ever knew. Brave, but not because he wasn't afraid. He just did what needed doing anyway. He loved to tell terrible jokes. A small laugh escaped him. He used to drive everyone crazy with puns. Grace said the same thing about the puns, Lila said, and there was a hint of warmth in her voice. He was always writing, Jack continued. Letters home, little notes to himself. Said he wanted to make sure everyone knew what they meant to him, just in case. He trailed off, the old guilt rising up. Just in case he didn't come back, Lila finished. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. They sat in shared silence, the weight of Danny's absence pressing down on them both. After a while, Lila spoke again. Sometimes I get so angry, she confessed. At him for leaving, at everyone else for having their dads. Even at Ella, which isn't fair, I know it isn't. Hey, Jack said softly, it's okay to be angry. What happened? It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. Lila drew her knees up to her chest, making herself small. Does it ever stop hurting? Jack wished he could lie to her, give her the comfort of a simple answer. But she deserved the truth. No, he said. But it changes, gets different, and sometimes the hurt reminds us how much love there was, still is. A car passed on the distant road, its headlights briefly illuminating their faces. In that flash of light, Jack saw Danny in the curve of Lila's jaw, the set of her shoulders. His chest ached with the recognition. They fell into silence again, but it was different now. Less strained, more companionable. The crickets chirped their endless song, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. They sat together, two people connected by loss and memory, watching the stars emerge in the Tennessee sky. Over the next few days, a gentle rhythm emerged in the Warner household. Lila would appear around lunchtime, hesitant at first, but gradually staying longer each visit. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a messy ponytail, became a familiar sight at their small kitchen table. On Tuesday, she helped Jack and Ella fold laundry, her nimble fingers making quick work of matching socks while Ella told animated stories about her day at school. Jack noticed how Lila's shoulders seemed to relax a little more with each visit, though her guard never fully dropped. Wednesday afternoon found them at the grocery store. Ella perched in the cart while Lila trailed behind them, occasionally tossing in items she thought they needed. You guys eat way too many frozen dinners, she commented, picking up a bag of fresh vegetables. Jack scratched his neck, embarrassed. Well, I'm not exactly a master chef. I could show you some easy recipes," Lila offered quietly, then immediately looked away, as if surprised by her own suggestion. Jack's heart squeezed at this small offering of connection. Thursday evening, they all sat on Jack's worn couch, watching an old comedy show. Ella had fallen asleep between them, her head resting against Lila's arm. Jack noticed how Lila didn't move away, even though she usually flinched from physical contact. But Friday brought storm clouds, both literal and emotional. They were at Heritage Park, the late afternoon, sun painting long shadows across the playground. Ella was on the swings, her laughter carrying across the park as Jack pushed her higher. "Higher, Daddy. I want to touch the clouds." "Not too high, sweetie. Don't want you floating away on me." Lila sat on a nearby bench, picking at the peeling paint. She'd been quieter than usual all afternoon, but Jack had learned to give her space when these moods struck. Then he saw what caught her attention. Across the playground, a man about Jack's age was teaching his teenage daughter how to shoot baskets. Their easy laughter and comfortable rapport were obvious even from a distance. The father's hands were gentle on his daughter's shoulders as he showed her the proper stance, their matching dark hair catching the sunlight. Jack watched Lila's face crumple before hardening into anger. She stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Lila?" Jack called softly, still pushing Ella on the swing. "Stop it!" Lila's voice cracked like thunder. "Just stop trying to be him." Jack carefully stopped Ella's swing, whispering for her to go play in the sandbox nearby. She looked between them with worried eyes, but did as she was told. "I'm not trying to be Danny," Jack said quietly, taking a step toward Lila. "I would never try to replace your father." "Then, what is all this?" Lila gestured wildly around her. "The family dinners, the movie nights, the everything. What do you want from me?" Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Danny's dog tags against his chest under his shirt. "I want to be here now, Lila, that's all. Not to replace anyone. Just to be here, in whatever way you'll let me." "Well, I didn't ask for this." Tears spilled down her cheeks now. "I didn't ask for any of this. You weren't there when I needed a father. You weren't there when I was bouncing between foster homes. You weren't there when I cried myself to sleep every night, wondering why nobody wanted me." Each accusation hit Jack like a physical blow, but he forced himself to stay steady. "You're right. I wasn't there then, and I'm so sorry for that. I should have been. Sorry doesn't fix anything." Lila's voice echoed across the park, causing several heads to turn. The father and daughter at the basketball court paused their game, looking over with concern. "No, it doesn't," Jack agreed softly. "Nothing can fix the past, Lila, but I'm here now, trying to honor your father's wishes and maybe, if you'll let me, build something new." "I don't need anything from you," Lila spat, but her voice wavered. "I've taken care of myself just fine. I know you have. You're strong, just like Danny was." Jack's voice grew thick with emotion. "But you shouldn't have had to be that strong, not alone." Lila shook her head hard, tears flying. "Stop talking about him like you knew him better than I did." "I didn't," Jack said simply. "I knew him as my brother in arms, my best friend. You knew him as your father, even if it was for too short a time. We both loved different parts of the same good man." Something in Lila's face broke at these words. She took several stumbling steps backward, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "I have to go," she choked out. Jack nodded, fighting every instinct to reach for her. "Okay," he said gently. "But Lila, my door is always open. Always." She turned and walked away quickly, her shoulders shaking. Jack watched her go, his heart aching, and whispered a prayer into the cooling evening air. "Lord, please guide her back when she's ready. Help me be patient. Help me be what she needs." Ella's small hand slipped into his. "Is Lila coming back, Daddy?" Jack squeezed her hand, trying to smile. "I hope so, sweetheart. Sometimes people need space to sort out their feelings. All we can do is love them and wait." "Like when you let my heart balloon go at the fair?" Ella asked. "You said sometimes we have to let things go and trust they'll come back if they're supposed to." Jack's throat tightened as he looked down at his daughter's wise little face. "Yeah, baby. Just like that." They stood together watching the path where Lila had disappeared, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. A cool breeze carried the scent of approaching rain, and somewhere in the distance, a mourning dove called out its lonely song. The next morning, Jack's world tilted on its axis when Grace called, her voice trembling. "Lila didn't come home last night. His stomach dropped. What do you mean? She was supposed to be back by 9. I thought maybe she was with you. I'll start looking, Jack said, already grabbing his keys. He called Mrs. Peterson next door to watch Ella, who was still sleeping. The morning sun cast long shadows as Jack drove through the streets of their small town, checking every place he could think of: the park, the library, the Veteran Center construction site. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Grace searched other locations, texting updates that only increased his anxiety. By afternoon, dark clouds gathered overhead, matching Jack's growing fear. He'd failed Danny, failed Lila, failed at the one thing he'd promised to do: keep her safe. His phone buzzed. Grace again. Still nothing. I've called all her old friends from back home. The police say we have to wait 48 hours. That's not good enough, Jack said, pulling into another parking lot. He closed his eyes, trying to think. Where would a hurting teenager go? Then it hit him. The church. Not the big one downtown, but the small white chapel on Oak Street where he sometimes went to think. He'd mentioned it to Lila during one of their talks on the porch. The parking lot was empty when he arrived. Rain started falling as he climbed the worn wooden steps, his heart pounding. The heavy door creaked open. There, in the third pew from the back, lay Lila. She was curled up on her side, using her backpack as a pillow, her dark hair spilling across the worn wooden seat. Jack's relief was so intense, it made his knees weak. He called Grace first. I found her. She's safe. Then he walked quietly down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the empty sanctuary. Lila stirred at the sound, sitting up quickly, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. Everyone's been worried sick about you, he said softly, sitting down in the pew in front of her, turning to face her. Lila hugged her knees to her chest. I heard you and Grace talking yesterday about how you weren't sure about taking me in. Jack's heart sank. He remembered the conversation, a moment of vulnerability when he'd confessed his fears to Grace after Lila had supposedly left. That's not, he started, then stopped, choosing his words carefully. I wasn't unsure about wanting you, Lila. I was scared of failing you. She looked up at him, confusion crossing her face. I've spent the last 15 years feeling like I failed your dad, Jack continued, his voice rough. I couldn't save him. Then I find out he had a daughter, this amazing, strong-willed girl, and all I could think was, what if I mess this up too? Rain drummed against the stained glass windows, filling the silence between them. I'm not exactly prime father material, Jack said with a sad smile. I work nights cleaning floors. I live in a trailer. I can barely cook spaghetti without burning it. You're a good dad to Ella, Lila said quietly. Ella came with simpler instructions. Jack tried to joke, then grew serious. But you deserve just as much care, Lila. I was never hesitant about wanting you in our lives. I was just terrified of not being enough. Lila's lower lip trembled. I thought you didn't want me. Like everyone else, Jack moved to her pew, sitting beside her. Listen to me. You are wanted. Your family. Not because of obligation or your dad's letter, but because you belong with us, if you want to be. He held out his hand, palm up, letting her choose. After a long moment, Lila's hand slipped into his. She didn't pull away. Would you like to come home? He asked softly. For good this time? Lila nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jack squeezed her hand gently. They drove home in comfortable silence, the rain letting up as they pulled into the driveway. Ella burst out the front door as soon as they arrived, running straight to Lila and wrapping her arms around her waist. You came back, Ella exclaimed. Of course I did, squirt, Lila said, her voice thick with emotion. She knelt down to Ella's level, tucking a strand of the little girl's hair behind her ear. Actually, would it be okay if I called you Little Sis from now on? Ella's face lit up like Christmas morning, her smile so bright it could have powered the whole town. She threw her arms around Lila's neck. Yes, yes, yes. Jack watched his daughter's embrace, his heart so full it hurt. Through the clearing clouds, a ray of sunlight broke through, warming their faces and casting long shadows across the yard. Sometimes, he thought, love comes in shadows and light, in running away and coming home, in the courage to try again despite all fears. Come on, he said, holding out his hands to both girls. Let's go inside. I think we've got some hot chocolate somewhere. The autumn days grew shorter, but Jack's world expanded in ways he never expected. The Veteran Center, still under construction, became his second home 3 afternoons a week. He'd clock out from his night shift at the hospital, catch a few hours of sleep, then head over to help with the interior work. Today, he carefully measured a section of drywall, marking it with precise pencil lines. Around him, other veterans worked steadily, Mike installing electrical outlets, Pete painting the counseling room, Sarah sketching out where the meditation garden would go. The sound of tools and quiet conversation filled the space with purpose. "Looking good," Warner called. Pete, wiping paint from his hands. "You missed your calling as a contractor." Jack smiled, scoring the drywall, just following Grace's vision. And what a vision it was! Already, the center felt like sanctuary. Veterans dropped by daily, even with construction ongoing, drawn to the promise of healing. They'd sit on folding chairs, share coffee from paper cups, and talk about things only others who'd served could understand. "Dad!" Leela's voice echoed through the unfinished hallway. She appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, still in her school clothes. "Youth group starts in an hour. Can I help until then?" Jack's heart warmed at the word Dad. It had slipped out naturally about 2 weeks ago, and now felt as comfortable as an old flannel shirt. "Sure, kiddo. Want to help me hang this section?" Lila dropped her bag and pulled on work gloves that were slightly too big. Together, they lifted the drywall into place, Jack showing her how to secure it properly. Her face glowed with concentration. "You're getting pretty good at this," he said. "Well, I had a good teacher," she grinned. "Plus, it's nice helping build something that matters." An hour later, Jack watched through the window as Lila joined the other teens, heading into the church next door. She'd found her place there, making friends who didn't care about her past, only who she was becoming. "She's blooming," Grace said, appearing beside him. Her presence felt natural now, like the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. "They both are," Jack nodded, thinking of Ella's latest art project. A family portrait showing all four of them together, even if Grace was only visiting. His daughter's crayon drawings had grown more colorful lately. "Speaking of both," Grace continued, "Ella's bus should be here soon. Want me to pick her up while you finish this section? Would you mind? I've got about 20 minutes of work left." Of course not." Grace squeezed his arm gently. "I was thinking, maybe you all could come over for dinner tonight? I found Mom's old lasagna recipe." Jack's stomach growled on cue. "Sounds perfect. Need me to bring anything? Just that guitar of yours. It's been too long since we had music in the house." Later that evening, Jack sat at Grace's kitchen table, watching her move confidently around the kitchen. The lasagna bubbled in the oven, filling the house with the scent of herbs and tomatoes. Ella and Lila sat cross-legged in the living room, heads bent over homework. "Danny would love this," Grace said softly, joining him at the table with 2 cups of coffee. "Seeing his family together?" Jack nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "He'd probably be giving me grief about my cooking skills, though." Grace laughed. "Remember that time he tried to make Thanksgiving dinner in Afghanistan? The turkey that wasn't really turkey? And the stuffing that was just crushed crackers?" They dissolved into laughter, sharing more stories until the oven timer buzzed. The girls helped set the table, and soon they were all seated together, passing warm bread and salad. "This is way better than Dad's spaghetti," Lila teased. "Hey now," Jack protested, but he was smiling. Some of us weren't blessed with the Callahan cooking gene. After dinner, Jack retrieved his guitar from the truck. It had been Danny's originally, given to Jack after. After. He settled into an armchair, testing the strings. "Play the one about the mountains," Ella requested, curling up on the couch next to Lila. Jack began to strum, his fingers remembering the old folk song. Grace sat nearby, her eyes soft in the lamplight, watching him with a warmth that made his heart skip. The music filled the room, and soon Ella was nodding off against Lila's shoulder. "Wait," Grace said suddenly, getting up. "We need a picture of this." She grabbed her camera from the shelf. "Everyone squeeze in." Jack shifted his chair closer to the couch. Grace set the timer and hurried to join them, perching on the arm of his chair. The camera flashed. When Grace showed them the result, Jack's breath caught. There was Ella, sleepy but smiling. Lila, looking truly relaxed for the first time in a photo, one arm around her sister. Grace, radiant beside him. And himself, guitar across his lap, looking more at peace than he had in years. "Now that's a keeper," Grace said softly. The next morning, Jack sat in his truck outside the courthouse, staring at the manila envelope on the passenger seat. Inside were the guardianship papers he'd picked up last week, now filled out in his careful handwriting. His hand shook slightly as he reached for them. This was it, the official step, making Lila legally his daughter. The papers would protect her future, give her stability, make their family real in the eyes of the law. Everything they'd built over these past months would have a foundation as solid as the veteran center's walls. Jack took a deep breath, grabbed the envelope, and stepped out into the bright morning sun. As he walked up the courthouse steps, he thought of Danny's letter, of Grace's faith in him, of Lila's first tentative smile, of Ella's unwavering belief that everything would work out just right. Inside, he signed his name on all the dotted lines, each stroke of the pen feeling like both an ending and a beginning. The clerk stamped the papers, making it official. "Congratulations," she said, smiling. "You're a father." Jack wanted to tell her he'd been a father all along, to Ella by birth, to Lila by choice and love, and the kind of promises that run deeper than blood. Instead, he just nodded, tucking the papers carefully into the envelope. When he stepped back outside, the autumn sun was higher, warming his face. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace, a photo of Lila and Ella at breakfast, making funny faces at the camera. Below it, she'd written, "Your girls say good morning." Jack smiled, holding the envelope close. His girls, his family. His heart full of hope that had been a long time growing, now blooming like wildflowers after rain. The kitchen counter was scattered with half-made sandwiches and fruit slices as Jack packed lunches for both girls. Mornings had a new rhythm now, busier, louder, but filled with a warmth that made his small mobile home feel like it was finally truly lived in. "Dad?" Lila called from the bathroom. "Have you seen my blue sweater?" "Dryer," he called back, carefully wrapping Ella's peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "Should be dry by now." Ella sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs as she munched on apple slices. "Can I wear my new shoes today? The sparkly ones?" "Those are for the talent show tonight, remember?" Jack reminded her, tucking a napkin into her lunchbox. "Let's save the sparkles for your big performance." Lila emerged from the bathroom, her dark hair neatly braided, wearing the now-found blue sweater. She grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl and started helping pack her own lunch. "You're both coming tonight, right?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "To the talent show?" "Wouldn't miss it," Jack assured her, noting how she tried to hide her smile. "Grace is meeting us there too." The school gymnasium was packed that evening. Jack and Grace sat together in the metal folding chairs, Ella between them, practically bouncing with excitement. The elementary school performances came first, including Ella's enthusiastic rendition of "This Little Light of Mine" with her Sunday school class. Then came the middle and high school acts. Lila's group was near the end, and Jack felt his chest tighten with pride when she walked onto the stage with her friends. They'd been practicing their dance routine for weeks in the living room, moving furniture aside to make space. The music started, some pop song Jack didn't know but had heard 100 times through Lila's bedroom door, and the girls began to move. Lila was graceful, confident, her face lit up with joy as she hit every step perfectly. When it was over, the applause was thunderous. Jack whistled loudly, not caring if he embarrassed her. Ella jumped up and down, clapping wildly. After the show, families milled around the gymnasium, congratulating performers and taking photos. Lila's friends clustered nearby, still giddy with adrenaline from their performance. "That was amazing," one of the moms said, approaching their group. "You girls were so in sync." "Thanks, Mrs. Thompson," Lila beamed. Then, gesturing to Jack, she said the words that stopped his heart. "This is my dad." The world seemed to pause for a moment. Jack blinked rapidly, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He managed to shake Mrs. Thompson's hand, but his throat was too tight to speak. "Well, you must be so proud, Mrs." Thompson said warmly. "I am," Jack finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. "So proud." Lila didn't seem to realize the weight of what she'd said already, turning back to her friends to discuss their performance. But Grace caught his eye, her own eyes shining with understanding. The drive home was filled with excited chatter. Ella insisted on hearing every detail about the dance routine, while Lila patiently explained each step. Jack stayed quiet, still processing the moment, his heart full to bursting. After they arrived home, Lila went to call Grace to thank her for coming, while Ella helped Jack make hot chocolate, putzed their post-performance tradition. "Daddy?" Ella asked, carefully stirring the chocolate powder into her warm milk. "Yeah, sweetheart? When are Lila and I going to be real sisters?" Jack paused, looking down at his daughter's earnest face. "What do you mean?" Well, Ella said thoughtfully, Tommy at school says you have to have papers to make people really family, like when his stepmom adopted him. Do we have papers for Lila? Jack knelt down to her level, touched by her concern. The papers are coming, honey. Soon. Promise? Promise. He kissed her forehead. But you know what? Sometimes family is made by love first, papers second. Ella nodded sagely, as if this confirmed something she'd already known. Later, after both girls were in bed, Jack heard a soft knock at the door. Grace stood on the porch, holding a folder of Veteran Center paperwork that needed his signature. I know it's late. She apologized, but I thought you might want to look these over before tomorrow's meeting. Come on up, he said, gesturing to the 2 chairs he'd set up on the small porch. The night was mild, crickets chirping in the darkness beyond the porch light's glow. They sat together, going through the papers, but Jack's mind kept drifting back to the talent show, to Lila's casual introduction that had meant everything. She called me Dad, he said suddenly, looking up from the papers. Grace's smile was soft, understanding. I heard. I never. He swallowed hard. I never expected. You earned it, Jack, Grace said gently. Every day, in all the small ways, the lunches, the homework help, the dance practice, that's what makes a father. Jack nodded, unable to speak. Their hands rested close together on the arm of the chair between them. Somehow, without either of them moving intentionally, their fingers brushed, neither pulled away. The touch was slight, just the sides of their hands meeting, but it sent warmth spreading through Jack's entire body. He looked at Grace, finding her already watching him, her eyes reflecting the porch light like stars. The moment stretched, delicate as spun glass. Jack could feel his heart beating steadily, no trace of the anxiety that had plagued him for so long. Finally, Grace reluctantly stood, gathering the signed papers. I should go. It's late. Yeah, Jack agreed softly, standing too. Thanks for bringing these by. She paused at the porch steps, turning back to look at him. There was something in her expression, a warmth, a longing, question not yet asked, that made Jack's breath catch. Good night, Jack, she said softly. Good night, Grace. He watched her walk to her car, watched until her taillights disappeared down the dirt road. Only then did he go inside, checking on both girls one last time before heading to bed himself. For the first time in years, since before Danny, before the war, before all the loss and pain, Jack fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, his dreams full of dance recitals and family dinners, of holding hands in porch light, of hope blooming like spring flowers after a long winter. The morning sun streamed through Jack's kitchen window as he stirred his coffee, watching Ella and Lila giggle over breakfast. Their cereal bowls clinked against the worn wooden table, and Jack couldn't help but smile at how natural it all felt now. His phone buzzed on the counter, probably Grace checking in about the Veteran Center's progress. But when he answered, it wasn't Grace's warm voice he heard. It was his lawyer, speaking in careful, measured tones. Jack, I need you to sit down for this, mister, Patterson said. I received notice this morning. Sarah's filing for full custody of Ella. The coffee mug slipped from Jack's hand, shattering on the linoleum floor. Both girls jumped, their laughter dying instantly. What? Jack's voice came out hoarse. She can't. She left us 3 years ago. She's citing financial instability, the lawyer continued. Your income, the mobile home, and she's mentioned your recent guardianship application for Lila as evidence of an unstable environment. Jack gripped the counter, his knuckles white. Through the roaring in his ears, he heard Lila's chair scrape back. Dad? Ella's small voice broke through. Why did you drop your cup? Girls, I need you to go to your rooms for a minute, Jack managed, trying to keep his voice steady, but they hadn't moved fast enough. They heard enough, claiming the child's current living situation is detrimental. The lawyer's words drifted from the phone. Lila's face went pale. Without a word, she bolted from the kitchen and down the narrow hallway. Her door slammed with enough force to rattle the family photos on the wall. Photos they'd only recently started taking together. Mr. Patterson, I need to call you back, Jack said, ending the call. He stepped carefully around the broken ceramic and coffee puddle. Ella, honey, stay here. Don't move, there's glass. He found Lila's door locked. Lila, please, he called softly, pressing his forehead against the cool wood. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is, her voice cracked. If I hadn't come here, if you weren't trying to take care of me too. He could hear her crying now. Everything I touch falls apart. That's not true, Jack insisted. We're family now. We'll figure this out together. Only silence answered him. He stood there for a long while until Ella's small hand slipped into his. Is Mommy trying to take me away? She whispered. Jack knelt down, pulling her close. I won't let that happen, baby. I promise. But his voice shook, and Ella buried her face in his shoulder. That evening, after tucking Ella into bed, Jack tried Lila's door again. This time it opened, but the room was empty. The window was open, curtains rustling in the cool night breeze. His heart stopped. Lila! He ran outside, scanning the darkness. Lila! His truck roared to life moments later. Jack drove through every street in their small town, checking the church, the park, the Veteran Center construction site. His phone rang. Grace. Jack? What's going on, Mrs.? Henderson called and said she saw you driving around looking upset. Lila's gone, he choked out. Sarah's trying to take Ella, and Lila heard, and now she's gone. Grace, I can't lose them both. I'm on my way, Grace said firmly. I'll check the bus station and the diner. We'll find her, Jack. For hours they searched. Jack called everyone he knew, Pastor Mayfield, the youth group leader, Lila's new school friends, nothing. By midnight, his truck was running on fumes, and his hope was running even lower. He pulled over at the edge of town, where the road met the woods. Rain had started to fall, pattering against the windshield. Jack's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Danny, he whispered, tears finally breaking free. I'm sorry, brother. I promised to take care of her, and I'm failing. I'm failing both our girls. The rain fell harder, and Jack's shoulders shook with quiet sobs. I can't lose them both, he repeated, his words lost in the storm. Please, please don't let me lose them both. His phone lit up with a text from Grace. Still looking. Don't give up. Jack wiped his eyes, trying to think clearly. Where else? Where would a scared, hurting 15-year-old go when she thought she was destroying everything? Then it hit him, the one place he hadn't checked. The place where all this began, 20 minutes. Later, he pulled into the empty bus station parking lot. There, huddled on the same bench where they'd first met, sat Lila. Her hair was wet from the rain, her backpack clutched to her chest. Jack approached slowly, his heart aching at how small and young she looked. If I leave, she said without looking up, maybe she won't take Ella away. Maybe if it's just her. No, Jack said firmly, sitting beside her. That's not how family works. Not our family. But I'm ruining everything. Lila turned to him, her eyes red and desperate. She's using me against you in court. If I go back to Grace, you're my daughter now too, Jack cut in. Maybe not by blood, like your dad was my brother, not by blood, but by choice, by love. He took a shaky breath. And I choose you, Lila. I choose both of you. We're gonna fight this, together. But what if we lose? Then we lose fighting as a family, Jack said. But we're not gonna lose, because your dad taught me something important. When you love someone, you don't give up. Ever. Lila's lower lip trembled, and suddenly she was in Jack's arms, sobbing against his shoulder just like she had as a baby all those years ago in Danny's photos. Jack held her tight, his own tears mixing with the rain. His phone buzzed. Grace again. Without letting go of Lila, he answered. I found her, he said softly. We're coming home. Grace's relief was audible. Both of you? Yeah, Jack said, looking down at Lila, who had finally stopped crying. Both of us. All of us. As they walked to the truck, Lila's hand stayed firmly in his. Dad, she said quietly. The first time she'd called him that, without it being an introduction to someone else. I'm sorry, I ran. I know, sweetheart. He squeezed her hand. Let's go home. Ella's probably worried sick, and we've got some fighting to do. They climbed into the truck, and as Jack started the engine, he noticed the rain had stopped. The moon peeked through the clouds, casting a gentle light on the road home. The old train station stood like a ghost at the edge of town, its weathered brick walls catching the early morning light. Grace's footsteps echoed through the empty platform as she walked, her heart pounding with each step. She'd been searching since dawn, checking every place she could think of where Lila might have gone. Then she remembered this was where Danny used to bring baby Lila on Sunday afternoons before his final deployment. He'd lift her tiny hands to wave at the passing trains, making whooshing sounds that would make her laugh. Grace spotted a figure huddled on one of the wooden benches, knees pulled tight to chest. Lila's dark hair fell forward, hiding her face. "I thought I might find you here," Grace said softly, approaching slowly like she would a wounded animal. "Your dad, Danny, he used to bring you here." Lila's shoulders tensed. "I remember. Sort of. Like in a dream." Her voice was hoarse. "Did Jack send you to find me?" "No." "Honey?" Grace sat down beside her niece, leaving space between them. "He's out searching everywhere else. He's worried sick about you." "He shouldn't be," Lila mumbled into her knees. "I'm just making everything worse. His ex-wife is right. Their home was stable before I came along." "That's not true at all," Grace said firmly. "Jack's ex-wife is wrong. She's just trying to hurt him because she can." A train whistle sounded in the distance, and Lila lifted her head. Her eyes were red and puffy. "Maybe I should just go back to my old foster home. Then Ella could stay with Jack." Grace's heart ached. She reached out and took Lila's cold hand. "Listen to me. You belong with Jack and Ella. They're your family now. But what if?" "No what ifs," Grace interrupted. "You know what I see when I look at you three together? I see healing. I see love. I see exactly what your father wanted." Lila wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "Jack probably hates me now. I keep running away, causing problems." "Oh, sweetheart." Grace wrapped an arm around her niece's shoulders. "Jack could never hate you. He loves you so much, it scares him sometimes. You know what he told me the other day? He said watching you and Ella together reminds him of how Danny used to look out for him." The morning sun climbed higher, warming the old platform. Another train rumbled past, and Lila leaned into Grace's embrace. "I'm just so scared," she whispered. "Everyone always leaves." "Not Jack," Grace said firmly. "That man has the most faithful heart I've ever known. He's not going anywhere." Meanwhile, across town, Jack sat in Pastor Mayfield's office, his head in his hands. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows on the floor. "I don't know what to do anymore, Pastor," he said, his voice rough. "Everything I touch seems to fall apart." Pastor Mayfield sat quietly in her chair, her wise eyes studying him. "Are you sure about that, Jack? Or are things finally falling into place?" He looked up, confused. "My ex-wife is trying to take Ella. Lila's run away. How is any of this falling into place?" "Sometimes," the pastor said, reaching for her well-worn Bible, "God uses our greatest challenges to show us our greatest strengths." She opened to a marked page. "Remember David? Before he was a king, he was a shepherd boy facing a giant. Everyone told him he couldn't win. But he did," Jack said quietly. "He did." Pastor Mayfield agreed. "Not because he was the strongest or the most prepared, but because he had faith. He surrendered his fear and trusted God's plan." Jack stood up and paced the small office. "I'm trying to trust, but every time I think I'm getting it right." "That's exactly when we need to trust the most," she interrupted gently. "When everything seems to be falling apart, that's when God is often putting things back together in ways we can't see yet." Jack stopped at the window, watching leaves dance in the morning breeze. "I just want to give them both a good life, a stable home." "And you will," Pastor Mayfield said, coming to stand beside him. "But first, you need to accept that you're not doing this alone. Let people help you, Jack. Let Grace help you. Let your church family help you." Jack nodded slowly, feeling some of the weight lift from his shoulders. His phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "Found her. She's safe. Bringing her home soon." The relief nearly brought him to his knees. That evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and pink, Grace's car pulled into Jack's driveway. He was waiting on the porch steps, having sent Ella to stay with a neighbor for a few hours. His heart pounded as Lila stepped out of the car, looking small and uncertain. She stood there for a moment, not moving, her eyes fixed on the ground. Jack walked slowly down the steps and across the yard until he stood in front of her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Without a word, Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She stiffened for a moment, then melted into the embrace, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. "Listen to me," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are mine, always. No matter what happens with custody battles or anything else, you are my daughter now. Nothing will change that." Lila's fingers clutched the back of his shirt. "But your ex-wife. We'll fight her together," Jack said firmly. "As a family, you and me and Ella, we're a package deal now. No one gets to change that." Grace watched from her car, tears streaming down her face as father and daughter held each other in the fading light. She saw Jack press a kiss to the top of Lila's head, saw the way Lila's body relaxed completely for the first time since she'd arrived in Tennessee. "I was so scared," Lila admitted, her voice muffled against Jack's shirt. "Me too," Jack said honestly. "But being scared doesn't mean we give up. It means we hold on tighter." They stood there together as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, their tears mixing with quiet laughter as they both tried to speak at once. Grace smiled through her own tears, knowing Danny would be proud of this moment, of the healing that was happening right before her eyes. Jack finally pulled back just enough to look at Lila's face, wiping her tears with his thumb. "No more running away, okay? We face things together from now on." Lila nodded, managing a wobbly smile. "Together," she agreed. Jack sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by papers and letters. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he sorted through the stack of support letters he'd gathered over the past few days. The Veteran Center's official letterhead caught his eye first, a detailed recommendation from the director praising Jack's dedication to both the center and his family. Mrs. Henderson from next door had written 3 pages in her shaky handwriting about how Jack helped clear her driveway every winter and how Ella would bring her cookies just because. 2 other neighbors had similar stories, simple acts of kindness that painted a picture of the kind of father Jack was. He picked up Pastor Louise's letter next, reading her powerful words about his transformation from a broken soldier to a devoted father. She described his unwavering faith and commitment to both his daughters with the kind of conviction that made his throat tight. "Daddy?" Ella's small voice made him look up. She stood in her pajamas, clutching a piece of paper covered in careful second-grade handwriting. "I wrote something too." Jack's heart squeezed as he lifted her onto his lap. "You did? Can I see?" Ella handed him the paper, decorated with hearts and flowers around the edges. Her words were simple but struck him deep. "Dear Judge, my daddy is the best daddy in the whole world. He works really hard and makes me feel safe. He reads me stories and helps me pray every night. Now I have a big sister too and we're happy. Please, let me stay with my daddy. He needs me and I need him. Love, Ella Warner." Jack had to blink hard several times, holding his daughter close. "Thank you, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "This means so much to me." "Is it good enough?" Ella asked, looking up at him with worried eyes. "It's perfect," Jack assured her, kissing her forehead. "The most perfect letter anyone could write." The screen door creaked, and Grace appeared with grocery bags, Lila trailing behind her with more supplies. "We're borrowing your kitchen," Grace announced with a warm smile. "No arguments." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" "Secret mission," Lila said, trying to hide a small smile. "You're banned from the kitchen for the next 2 hours." Grace shooed him and Ella out while she and Lila unpacked the bags. Soon, the small trailer filled with the sweet smell of baking. Jack tried to peek once, but got his hand playfully swatted by Grace. "Out," she ordered, but her eyes were twinkling. "Go, organize your papers or something." He retreated to the living room with Ella, sorting through more documents, while his daughter colored nearby. The sounds from the kitchen, quiet laughter, measuring cups clinking, the oven door opening and closing, made his humble home feel fuller somehow. After what seemed like forever, Lila called out, "Okay, you can come in now." Jack walked into the kitchen and stopped short. On the counter sat a golden brown peach cobbler, steam still rising from its perfectly crispy top. The smell hit him like a memory, sweet and familiar in a way that made his chest ache. "Danny's recipe," Grace said softly. "Lila wanted to learn how to make it for you." Jack looked at Lila, who stood nervously wiping her flour-covered hands on her jeans. "Aunt Grace said it was your favorite when you were in the Army," she explained. "Dad, Danny, he used to make it for the whole unit sometimes." Jack nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He remembered those rare, peaceful moments during deployment when Danny would somehow convince the mess hall staff to let him bake, filling their small corner of the base with the scent of home. "Try it?" Lila asked, holding out a spoon. Jack took a bite, and the taste transported him instantly. The perfect balance of sweet peaches and buttery crust, exactly how Danny used to make it. He had to steady himself against the counter. "It's perfect," he managed, "exactly like his." Lila's face lit up with pride, and Grace squeezed her shoulder. Ella bounced excitedly. "Can I try too?" They gathered around the small kitchen table, sharing the warm cobbler. Jack watched his unlikely family, Ella chattering happily, Lila relaxing into her chair, Grace laughing at something his youngest had said. The weight of tomorrow's hearing still pressed on his shoulders, but right now, in this moment, he felt rich beyond measure. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking at both Grace and Lila, not just for the cobbler, but he gestured around the kitchen at all of them together. "We're family now," Grace replied simply. "This is what family does." Lila nodded, meeting Jack's eyes. "And we stick together," she added firmly, sounding so much like Danny that Jack's heart skipped. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Jack sat alone at the table. The empty cobbler dish sat in front of him, and the stack of support letters waited nearby. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight had given him something precious, a taste of the future he was fighting for, the home they were building together, one day at a time. The county courthouse loomed before Jack like a mountain, its red brick facade stern and imposing in the morning light. His navy suit, borrowed from Pastor Mayfield, felt stiff and foreign. Ella's small hand squeezed his right palm while Lila held tight to his left, both girls dressed in their Sunday best. "We're right here with you, Dad," Lila whispered, the word Dad still new but growing, more natural each time she said it. Inside the courtroom, polished wooden benches creaked as people settled in. Jack recognized familiar faces, veterans from the center, church members, and neighbors who'd come to support him. Grace sat in the front row, wearing a simple blue dress, her presence steady and reassuring. When Jack's ex-wife entered with her lawyer, the air grew thick with tension. She looked expensive and put together, everything Jack wasn't. His throat tightened, but Ella's small voice piped up, "I love you, Daddy," and his courage returned. The proceedings began with formal introductions. Jack's court-appointed lawyer presented their case first, explaining Jack's situation clearly and carefully. When it was Jack's turn to testify, he stood slowly, conscious of every eye in the room. "Please state your name for the record," the judge instructed. Her glasses perched low on her nose. "Jack Warner, Your Honor." His voice came out steady despite his racing heart. "Mr. Sen, Warner, please tell the court about your current situation." Jack cleared his throat. "I work as a janitor at Memorial Hospital, ma'am, and I help out at the new Veterans Center. It's not much, but I make enough to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. And you're seeking to maintain custody of your daughter while simultaneously taking in another child?" The judge's tone carried a hint of doubt. "Yes, ma'am." Jack's hands gripped the wooden railing. "I know it might not look ideal on paper, but my girls, they're everything to me." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've made mistakes in my life, especially after coming back from Afghanistan. I wasn't always the man I should have been. But Ella, she saved me. She gave me purpose when I was lost." The judge leaned forward. "And this other child, Lila? What makes you think you can provide for both of them?" "Because love multiplies, Your Honor. It doesn't divide." Jack's voice grew stronger. "Lila is my best friend's daughter. Danny saved my life over there, and now his daughter. She's helping save it again. Both my girls make me want to be better every day." The opposing lawyer stood up, his expensive suit gleaming. "But isn't it true, Mr. Warner, that you live in a mobile home? That you sometimes work double shifts just to make ends meet?" "Yes, sir, that's true." Jack straightened his shoulders. "Our home might be small, but it's filled with love. And those extra shifts, they taught my girls the value of hard work and responsibility." One by one, community members took the stand. Mr. Sud Rodriguez from the Veterans Center spoke about Jack's dedication to helping other veterans. Mrs. Henderson testified about how Jack always helped her with yard work, never asking for anything in return. Pastor Mayfield described Jack's spiritual growth and commitment to his family. When Grace took the stand, her testimony brought tears to several eyes. "I've watched Jack with both girls," she said, her voice clear and confident. "He has the biggest heart of anyone I know. He's exactly the kind of father Danny would have wanted for his daughter." The judge listened intently, taking notes. But her expression remained unreadable. Finally, Ella stood up, clutching a piece of paper decorated with crayon hearts. The judge's stern expression softened slightly as she looked at the little girl. "Would you like to read your letter, sweetheart?" the judge asked gently. Ella nodded, her pigtails bouncing. Her small voice filled the courtroom. "Dear Judge, God gave me the best daddy. He works really hard and makes me feel safe. He reads me stories and helps me pray every night. Sometimes we don't have lots of money for fancy things, but we have love. Now I have a big sister too, and we're happy. Please don't take him away." The simplicity and honesty of her words hung in the air. Jack noticed the judge remove her glasses and dab at her eyes quickly. "The court will take a brief recess to consider all testimony," the judge announced, rising from her bench. "We'll reconvene in 30 minutes." The waiting room felt like a prison cell to Jack. He sat between his girls, holding their hands tightly. Ella leaned against his arm, humming softly to herself. Lila's face was tense, but she hadn't let go of his hand since they sat down. Grace brought them water and sat nearby, her presence a silent comfort. The minutes crawled by like hours. Jack could hear his heart pounding in his ears, feel the weight of everything he could lose pressing down on his shoulders. "Daddy," Ella whispered, "I asked Jesus to help us." Jack squeezed her hand. "That's good, sweetheart. That's real good." Lila's grip tightened on his other hand. "We're not going anywhere," she said firmly, though her voice quivered slightly. "We're family now." The bailiff appeared at the door, calling them back into the courtroom. Jack stood on shaky legs, his girls rising with him. As they walked back in, he felt the support of everyone who had come to stand with him, a community he hadn't even realized he had until today. They took their seats, still holding hands, waiting for the judge to return and deliver her decision. The room fell silent except for the soft whisper of papers and the gentle squeak of chairs. Jack closed his eyes briefly, saying his own prayer, holding onto his daughter's hands like lifelines in a storm. Inside the hushed courtroom, Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. The old clock on the wall ticked away endless seconds as they waited for the judge to return. Ella leaned against his arm, her small fingers tracing patterns on his borrowed suit sleeve. Lila sat rigid beside him, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. Judge Margaret Harrison, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, stepped back into the courtroom. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise!" Jack stood on shaky legs, his daughters rising with him. He felt a gentle touch on his shoulder Grace, who had moved closer from her seat in the front row. "Be seated," Judge Harrison said, adjusting her papers before looking directly at Jack. "Mr. Warner, I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today with great care." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone coughed in the back of the courtroom. Jack could barely breathe. "What stands out to me most clearly," the judge continued, "is not the question of financial resources, but the abundance of love in your home." She smiled softly. "The letters from your community paint a picture of a man who, despite his own struggles, has created a safe and nurturing environment for his daughter. Moreover, you've opened your heart and home to your late friend's child without hesitation." Tears pricked at Jack's eyes. He felt Lila's hand slip into his. "The testimony from Miss Callahan regarding your dedication to the Veterans Center, your commitment to personal growth, and your unwavering focus on both girls' well-being is compelling. But perhaps most telling was your own honest admission of your past difficulties and your clear determination to overcome them." Judge Harrison lifted a paper from her desk. "Therefore, regarding the petition for full custody of Ella Warner, I find in favor of the father, Jack Warner. Full custody will remain with him." A soft sob escaped from Ella. Jack pulled her close, his vision blurring. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "regarding the petition for legal guardianship of Lila Callahan, I hereby grant full legal guardianship to Jack Warner, as per the wishes expressed in Daniel Callahan's will and with the full support of her current guardian, Grace Callahan." The judge's gavel struck with finality. "This court is adjourned." For a moment, Jack couldn't move. The words seemed to float in the air around him, too wonderful to be real. Then suddenly, Lila turned to him. Her face crumpled with emotion, tears streaming down her cheeks. In one swift motion, she threw her arms around his neck, something she'd never done before, not in public, not with such abandon. "You're my dad," she whispered against his shoulder, her voice breaking. "I know it now. I really know it." Jack wrapped one arm around her while keeping Ella close with the other, his own tears falling freely now. He could feel Lila's heart racing against his chest, could feel the wetness of her tears on his collar. This fierce, wounded girl who had kept herself so carefully guarded was finally fully letting him in. "I love you both so much," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. Through his tears, he saw Grace watching them, her hands pressed to her mouth, crying quietly. She had made this possible, all of it. Their eyes met across the space between them, and in that moment, Jack saw all the pain and joy of their shared journey reflected in her gaze. People were clapping, the veterans, church members, and neighbors who had come to support them. Pastor Mayfield stood beaming, while Mrs. Chin from next door wiped her eyes with a tissue. But Jack barely registered them. His world had narrowed to these precious souls in his arms. They made their way out of the courtroom slowly, accepting hugs and congratulations. Outside, the spring sunshine felt like a blessing on their faces. The courthouse steps were warm under their feet as they paused, still holding on to each other. "We're really a family now?" Ella asked, looking up at Jack with shining eyes. "Forever and ever?" "Forever and ever, sweetheart," Jack assured her, his voice thick with emotion. Lila sniffed and wiped her eyes, but she was smiling, a real, unguarded smile that transformed her whole face. "I never thought, after Dad died, I never believed I'd have this again, a real family." "You've always had a family," Grace said softly, joining them. "It just took us a while to bring all the pieces together." Jack pulled his daughters closer, marveling at how perfectly they fit against his sides. Ella, sunny and sweet, her faith in him never wavering. Lila, strong and healing, finally allowing herself to trust and love again. And Grace, watching them with eyes full of joy and something more, something that made his heart skip a beat. The spring breeze ruffled Ella's ribbons and caught at Lila's dark hair, carrying the scent of blooming dogwoods from the courthouse lawn. Jack breathed in deeply, this moment of pure grace. Danny's last letter had asked him to be a father to Lila, to give her the love and stability she deserved. Standing here now, Jack felt his best friend's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, both to heaven and to his daughters. "Thank you." They stood together on the courthouse steps, holding each other close, no longer three separate souls, but one true family, bound together by love that was stronger than blood, stronger than loss, stronger than any doubt or fear that had come before. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the newly completed Veterans Center. Fresh paint gleamed on the walls, and rows of folding chairs filled the main hall. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and fresh-baked cookies through the open doors as people filed in for the grand opening ceremony. Jack adjusted his tie in the small office mirror, his hands trembling slightly. The Navy suit, a gift from the Veterans Center's board, felt foreign after years of work uniforms and worn jeans. But today was special. Today was about honoring promises and new beginnings. "Need help with that?" Grace appeared in the doorway, elegant in a simple blue dress. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she crossed the room. "Please," Jack said, dropping his hands. "I haven't worn one of these since." He didn't need to finish. They both knew, since Danny's funeral. Grace stepped closer, her fingers working quickly to straighten his tie. "Danny would be so proud of you, Jack. Look how far you've come." Through the window, Jack could see Lila helping Ella arrange programs on the welcome table. His daughters, the thought still amazed him, worked together seamlessly now, their laughter carrying across the parking lot. "I still can't believe they offered me the job," Jack said softly. "Full-time veterans counselor? Me. Who better?" Grace stepped back, admiring her handiwork with the tie. "You've lived it. You understand what these men and women are going through." The main hall slowly filled with familiar faces. Pastor Mayfield sat near the front, chatting with some church members. Veterans from Jack's support group found seats together, their wives and children beside them. Even some of Jack's former co-workers from the hospital had come to show their support. Lila appeared in the doorway wearing a simple white dress that made her look so much like her mother's old photos. "They're ready to start, Dad." The words still came naturally now, wrapped in warmth instead of hesitation. Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. "You remember your cue for the song? Right after Grace's speech?" Lila said, rolling her eyes good-naturedly. "I've only practiced it 1,000,000 times." The ceremony began with the presentation of colors by a local veterans group. Jack sat between his girls, his heart full as he watched Grace approach the podium. The morning light caught her hair as she opened her prepared remarks. 3 months ago, this building was just an empty shell," Grace began, her voice steady and clear. "But like the veterans, it will serve. It had so much potential waiting to be discovered." She paused, her eyes finding Jack's. "Sometimes the greatest transformations come from unexpected places. My brother Danny knew that. He believed in second chances, in the power of family, both the ones we're born into and the ones we choose." Jack squeezed Ella's hand as Grace continued, sharing stories of Danny's dream for the center, his dedication to his fellow soldiers, and his unshakable faith in people's capacity to heal and grow. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stood slowly, straightening his shoulders as he walked to the podium. The index cards in his pocket remained untouched. He knew what needed to be said. "I met Danny Callahan on my first day of basic training," Jack began, his voice rough with emotion. He had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered. Even when things were at their darkest, Danny could find hope. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "When we lost him, I thought that hope died too. I was wrong," Jack gestured to the walls around them. "This center isn't just about helping veterans heal. It's about remembering that none of us walks alone." Danny knew that. He lived it. And somehow, even after he was gone, he made sure we all remembered it too. His eyes found Lila and Ella sitting together in the front row. Through his daughter, through his sister, through every life he touched, Danny's legacy lives on. This center is part of that legacy, but the real miracle isn't in these walls. It's in the way love finds us when we least expect it, the way family can grow even through loss, and the way hope refuses to die as long as we keep making room for it. When Jack finished, the room fell silent for a moment before erupting in applause. He returned to his seat, and Lila squeezed his hand before standing and walking to the small platform where a keyboard had been set up. Her fingers found the keys, and the first notes of Amazing Grace filled the room. But these weren't the traditional words. Lila had written her own verses, a daughter's tribute to the father she'd never met and the family she'd finally found. Her clear voice carried through the hall. "Through years of wondering who I'd be, your love was waiting patiently. Through broken hearts and second starts, Amazing Grace has set us free." By the final verse, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The standing ovation was immediate and heartfelt. Jack watched as people, the late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the Veteran Center's parking lot as the last guest departed. Jack watched Ella and Lila helping Grace collect empty paper plates and fold chairs, their movements synchronized like they'd been doing it together forever. His heart swelled at the sight. "You girls did an amazing job today," he called out, rolling up his sleeves to pitch in. "How about we celebrate with dinner at our place?" Ella's face lit up. "Can we make your famous chili, Daddy?" "Famous might be stretching it," Jack chuckled, stacking chairs against the wall. "But yeah, I think we've got everything we need at home." Lila turned to Grace with hopeful eyes. "Please say you'll come, Aunt Grace." "You haven't tried Dad's chili yet." The word Dad still caught Jack off guard sometimes, in the best possible way. He glanced at Grace, trying to keep his expression casual despite the way his pulse quickened. "Well," Grace pretended to consider, her eyes twinkling, "I suppose I should find out if this chili lives up to all the hype." The drive home felt different somehow, charged with possibility. Jack followed Grace's car in his truck, watching through the rearview mirror as Ella and Lila chatted animatedly in the back seat. The setting sun turned everything golden, making even their modest mobile home look warm and welcoming as they pulled into the driveway. Inside, the kitchen came alive with activity. Jack browned the ground beef while Lila chopped onions, wiping her eyes dramatically. Ella set the table, insisting on using the fancy plates they usually save for Christmas. Grace perched on a kitchen stool, sharing stories about Danny's notorious attempts at cooking when they were kids. "He once tried to make mac and cheese without draining the water first," she recalled, laughing. "It was like cheese soup." "Sounds about right," Jack grinned, stirring the pot. "Your brother could. Field strip and M16 blindfolded, but basic kitchen skills? Not so much." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, punctuated by genuine laughter and comfortable silences. Jack noticed how Grace's eyes crinkled when she smiled, how she listened intently when either girl spoke, treating their words as precious things. After the dishes were done and the kitchen cleaned, Ella yawned dramatically. "I'm so tired from all that chair folding." Lila caught on quickly. "Me too. We should probably head to bed early." Jack raised an eyebrow at their less than subtle exit strategy but didn't argue. "All right then. Don't forget your prayers." The girls hugged Grace goodnight, then Jack, before disappearing down the narrow hallway. Their whispered giggles carried back to the kitchen. "Would you like to sit outside for a bit?" Jack gestured toward the small porch. "It's a beautiful night." Grace nodded, following him out into the evening air. They settled into the two weathered chairs Jack had, recently repaired, the wood creaking softly beneath them. Cricket songs filled the comfortable silence between them. The porch light cast a gentle glow, softening the edges of everything. Jack could smell the honeysuckle that grew wild along the fence line, mixed with the lingering scent of Grace's perfume. "I need to thank you," he said finally, his voice quiet but clear. Grace turned toward him, her expression questioning. "For what?" "For everything." Jack looked out at the yard, gathering his thoughts. "For finding me that day with the flat tire, for bringing Danny's letter, for trusting me with Lila." He paused, his throat tight with emotion. "You changed my whole life, Grace." She was quiet for a moment, then reached over and touched his hand. "It wasn't me, Jack." He looked at her, confused. "It was Danny's wish," she continued softly. "It was God's plan, and most of all, it was your heart." Her fingers intertwined with his. "I just helped point the way. You're the one who chose to walk it, even when it was hard, even when you were scared." Jack's thumb traced small circles on her palm. "Still, I wouldn't be here without you." None of this would have happened if Grace turned in her chair to face him fully. The porch light caught the tears in her eyes, making them shine. Maybe it would have happened differently. But Danny knew what he was doing when he wrote those letters. He knew exactly who you were, what kind of man you'd be for his daughter. Their faces were close now, the space between them charged with something that had been building for weeks, maybe months. "And what kind of man is that?" Jack's voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind who stops to help strangers with flat tires," Grace smiled. "The kind who loves with his whole heart, even when it scares him. The kind my brother trusted more than anyone else in the world." Jack leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, Grace met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, like a question being asked and answered in the same breath. When they parted, Jack rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, savoring the moment. The night wrapped around them like a blanket. Somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called. The porch swing creaked softly in the breeze. Neither spoke, letting the peaceful silence say what words couldn't. Jack's hand found Grace's again, and they sat together, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Everything felt right, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. In the quiet, Jack could almost hear Danny's voice. "Took you long enough, brother." The crickets sang their evening symphony, and somewhere inside, two girls probably weren't sleeping at all, but that was okay. Everything was okay. Grace squeezed his hand, and Jack squeezed back, grateful for second chances, for answered prayers, and for the kind of love that builds bridges across the deepest waters. A gentle breeze rustled through the oak trees at Veterans Memorial Park, carrying the sweet scent of barbecue and the sound of children's laughter. Jack Warner stood by the grill, expertly flipping burgers while keeping an eye on the gathering spread across the grassy area. His heart swelled as he watched 16-year-old Lila leading a group of younger kids in a game of capture the flag. "Dad," Ella called out, running toward him with her ponytail bouncing. "Can I have another hot dog?" "This would be your third, sweetheart." Jack chuckled, but reached for a bun anyway. At 8 years old, Ella's appetite seemed bottomless these days. "I'm growing," she declared proudly, standing on her tiptoes. The Sunday youth group picnic had become their family tradition over the past year. Jack watched as Lila paused the game to help a smaller child who had fallen, showing the same gentle patience he'd seen grow in her day by day. Gone was the angry, defensive teenager who had first arrived on that bus. In her place stood a confident young woman who had finally found her place in the world. "You're doing that proud papa thing again," Grace said, sliding her arm around his waist. Her engagement ring caught the sunlight as she reached up to straighten his collar. "Can't help it," Jack admitted, pulling her close. "Sometimes I still can't believe how blessed we are." Pastor Mayfield approached them, her wise eyes twinkling. "The engagement party preparations are all set for this evening at the center," she said. "Though I think half the town is coming rather than just the invited guests. That's what happens when you marry the most beloved Veterans Center director in Tennessee," Jack teased, earning a playful swat from Grace. Later that afternoon, the Veterans Center's main hall was transformed. Twinkling lights hung from the exposed beams, and photos of their blended family decorated the walls. Jack stood in his best suit, overwhelmed by the crowd of well-wishers. "Daddy," Lila called out, making her way through the guests. The word still made his heart skip a beat, even after hearing it for months now. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes, Danny's eyes, and carried something behind her back. "I have something for you," she said, suddenly shy. "Ella helped me with it." She brought out a beautifully wrapped package. Jack carefully removed the paper to reveal a wooden frame. Inside was a photograph taken just last week. Lila and Ella sitting on their front porch steps, arms around each other, both laughing at some shared joke. Below the photo, carefully preserved behind glass, was a weathered piece of paper Jack recognized immediately, Danny's letter. His hands trembled as he read the familiar words. "If you're reading this, Jack, you're her dad now. I found it when we were going through the old boxes," Lila explained softly. I thought maybe it belonged here, with us, with our family picture." Jack pulled her into a tight bride hug, not caring about the tears that threatened to fall. "Thank you, sweetheart," he whispered. "I love you so much." "I love you too, Dad," she answered, her voice strong and sure. The crowd gathered as Pastor Mayfield called for their attention. She stood before them, her presence commanding respect and radiating warmth. "A year ago," she began, "I sat with a man who doubted his ability to be what others needed. Today, I see before me a family built on faith, courage, and love." She turned to Jack and Grace, who stood with their girls between them. The Lord works in mysterious ways, but sometimes His plan becomes crystal clear. Through loss and pain, He brought healing. Through doubt, He brought certainty. Through loneliness, He brought family. She raised her hands over them. "May God bless this union and this family. May He continue to guide you as you build your life together, and may you always remember that love, like the love that brought you here, never fails." The bye. Gathering erupted in applause. Jack looked around at the faces. Veterans he'd helped at the center, neighbors who'd supported them through the custody battle, church members who'd embraced them all. His gaze settled on the wall where Danny's name was engraved among other fallen soldiers. Ella tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we dance now?" Jack laughed, lifting her into his arms. "Of course we can, princess." He held out his other hand to Lila. "Both my girls?" They moved to the center of the floor as music began to play. Grace watched them with tears in her eyes, and Jack motioned for her to join them. Soon they were all swaying together, a family circle in the middle of the dance floor. "Look," Ella whispered, pointing to the framed photo and letter that now sat on the gift table. "Uncle Danny's watching too." Jack held his daughters closer, feeling Grace's hand steady in his. The letter's words echoed in his mind, not as a burden now, but as a blessing. Danny had known, somehow, that this moment would come, that love would find a way to heal them all. In that moment, surrounded by his family and community, Jack finally understood what Danny had meant in his letter. Being a dad wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about showing up, loving fiercely, and believing in second chances. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, painting the Tennessee sky in deep purples and blues. Inside Jack Warner's modest mobile home, the evening routine felt different tonight, richer somehow, filled with the kind of quiet joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. "Time for bed, girls," Jack called out, his voice gentle but firm. The sound of muffled giggles drifted from Lila's room, where she and Ella had been sharing secrets and stories, as sisters do. Jack leaned against the doorframe, taking in the sight before him. Lila sat cross-legged on her bed, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders, while Ella perched beside her, still wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas. The walls, once bare, now held photos of their growing family, snapshots of lake days, picnics, and quiet moments that marked their journey together. "5 more minutes, Dad?" Ella pleaded, her eyes wide with hope. "Not tonight, sweetheart," Jack said, smiling. "You've got school tomorrow, and your sister has that big chemistry test." Lila rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Way to remind me." Jack watched as Ella hugged her big sister tight, their bond evident in the easy affection they shared. "Night, Lila, love you," Ella chirped, hopping off the bed and scampering to her own room. Following his youngest daughter, Jack tucked Ella in with practiced care, smoothing her covers and placing her stuffed rabbit just so. "Sweet dreams, my angel," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. When he returned to Lila's room, she was already under her covers, but her eyes were wide awake and thoughtful. Jack sat on the edge of her bed, just as he had done countless nights before, but tonight, something in Lila's expression made him pause. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Lila's fingers played with the edge of her quilt, a habit she had when deep in thought. "I was just thinking about that day," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you stopped to help Aunt Grace with her flat tire?" Jack's heart squeezed in his chest. He could still see that rainy morning clearly, the puddles on the asphalt, Ella watching from the truck, Grace's mysterious smile. If you hadn't stopped, Lila continued, her eyes growing glassy with tears. If you'd just driven by like most people would have. She drew in a shaky breath. Daddy, thank you for stopping to change that tire. The word daddy still hit him like a punch to the heart every single time. Jack reached out and brushed a tear from Lila's cheek with his thumb, this brave, beautiful girl who had Danny's eyes. In spirit, his daughter in every way that mattered. Come here, he whispered, gathering her into a hug. Lila buried her face in his shoulder, just like she used to do when she first came to live with them, and the nightmares would wake her. I will always stop for you, he murmured into her hair. Always. When he pulled back, Lila's smile was wobbly but real. Jack leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Get some rest, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad, she replied, settling back against her pillows. Jack paused at the doorway, looking back at his daughter. Danny's gift to him, though he hadn't known it that rainy morning. Good night, Lila. He clicked off her light, leaving just the soft glow of her bedside lamp. The hallway was quiet now, both his girls tucked safely in their beds. Jack made his way through the living room where family photos covered the walls. Proof of their journey from strangers to family. The screen door creaked softly as he stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of jasmine from Grace's newly planted vines. As if summoned by his thoughts, she appeared beside him, her hand slipping naturally into his. They stood in comfortable silence, gazing up at the vast expanse of stars scattered across the Tennessee sky. Jack thought about all the nights he'd spent out here alone, drowning in guilt and grief. Now, with Grace's hand in his and his daughter sleeping peacefully inside, that darkness felt like a distant memory. Thank you, Danny, Jack whispered to the starlit sky, his voice thick with emotion. He could almost hear his friends laugh, see his crooked grin. Somewhere up there, Danny was watching, and Jack knew. He knew with absolute certainty that his friend was smiling. Grace squeezed his hand, and Jack pulled her closer. The porch light flickered softly above them, casting gentle shadows across the wooden boards. Beneath their feet, peace settled over them like a familiar blanket. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you're home, truly home, at last. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Warner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.